Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 mini-series with your 2029 World Series champion, Los Angeles Angels. And we'll begin this episode with a quick programming note, as those of you who have followed us over this series probably know. This is a mini-series, and we will be doing a long play with a team in OOTP 26, hopefully in the not too distant future. But I am at this point waiting for one more patch to come out for OOTP to clean up some things that are still a little bit annoying to me, and I'm guessing annoying to some of you as well. So I've had some thought about whether we should continue with these Angels or move on to a second mini-series here in OOTP 26. And although there's no date that I know of when the next patch is going to be out, the previous patch was about 2.5 weeks away at this point. So what I don't want to do is start a new series, play one season or two seasons, and not really be able to completely remake the team the way that I want, and then be very tempted to just bail on something that's kind of incomplete to start my long play series. So long story short, we're going to play at least one more season with these Angels. As soon as there is an updated patch out that is not just in beta, but an official patch for the game, we'll likely be finishing up whatever we're doing with these Angels and then moving on to our long play. But right now, our focus remains these Los Angeles Angels and trying to steer this team to a repeat championship in 2030. So this episode, we're going to take a look back at how everyone performed this year and start planning for the off-season. We've got a few critical decisions to make. Taking a look at our financial situation, our budget actually got cut back by $6 million despite winning the World Series this year, because we did lose Mr. Moreno over $31 million last year. We've cut our scouting and player development budgets down significantly just here for the beginning of the postseason or the off-season to give ourselves a little more financial flexibility as we're going to be figuring out what we'd like to do. The hope certainly is that we can get scouting and player development back up to somewhat higher levels before we get to next season. But unlikely to be very significant players in the free agent market this upcoming offseason, unless we make some hard decisions with a couple of relatively expensive players, because there are ways for us to free up some money with team options on 3 players, 2 of whom are among the most expensive on our entire roster. The one that's not so expensive is Gabe Spire. We've got an offer or option year for him at $3.5 million next year. Not incredibly expensive, but as a guy who's going to be 35 in April, whose ERA climbed to 3.83 this year, and was basically a replacement level guy and looks like a pure average pitcher, might be time for us to consider moving on from Spire. The thing that he does have going for him is he's a lefty, and he's definitely more effective against lefties than righties, so that left-handed specialist role that he's had for us for the past few years is one that we might need to make alternative plans for if we do move on from Spire at $3.5 million. The 2 bigger decisions are 2 more significant players, though. Michael King, who we signed in that first offseason of 2025 to 2026, been one of the top pitchers on our team since then, been our ace for a good chunk of this run, although this year he was our number 3 starter. Have an option for $17 million on him for next year, and if we happen to exercise it for the year after that, he's going to be turning 35 next spring, and he's fragile in terms of his injury proneness. Hasn't pitched a full season for us since 2027. Injury issues in both 2028 and 2029. This past year, he was possibly having his finest season ever with us. 10-3 record, 2.06 ERA, and a 2.2 WAR at the midway point of the season. But he suffered a significant injury, torn rotator cuff back on June 30th, and missed the rest of the season as well as the playoffs. And then the most expensive decision is Kyle Tucker, who along with Michael King and Vlad Guerrero Jr. were those three very prominent free agent signings we made that first off season after we had moved on from contracts that were very expensive involving the likes of Anthony Rendon, Mike Trout, and others that first year. Tucker set to make $30 million next season. 32 years old. He's had mixed results with us, but he's coming off by far the best season he's had in his 4 years with us here in Los Angeles. Hit 278, 34 homers, 110 ribbies, put up a 143 WRC plus, if I could speak properly, and a 5.7 WAR. So the interesting thing is that these two expensive guys in their 30s that we built the team options in are both coming off of some of the best seasons we've gotten from them and helped lead us to a World Series championship, even though King was not around for the playoffs as we talked about. But certainly if we were to move on from King and or Tucker, that would put us in a position where we'd have a lot more money for scouting and player development, and potentially have enough money to make a run at a free agent this year. Gotten some feedback from members of the Worldwide Scouting Department on moving on from Tucker and King, and totally get where that's coming from. I guess the one thing that I know about that you don't yet, but you will learn now, is what the prospective upcoming free agent pools look like. And position player-wise, outside of maybe Colton Cowser, who is not as good in my mind as Tucker, going to be 30 next year and is looking for $20 million. And then C.J. Abrams, who is the prize of the class, another guy who's 29 years old, coming off of a nice combined year with Washington and Cincinnati, where he had 30 homers and 92 ribbies, 4.5 WAR. So a little bit younger than Tucker. Over the last few years, he's been more productive than Tucker, although Tucker, as we talked about, coming off a great year. But Abrams looking for $35.5 million, and certainly for more than 1 year. If we were to move on from Tucker, we're likely only going to be chasing after Abrams on the free agent market to try to replace him. So a little bit of a question, do we take the bird in hand, or do we kind of keep pursuing someone a little bit potentially better and younger? In the case of Abrams, I guess I did have the view only on the batters, so we'll just go back, or only on outfielders, but to look at all batters, and just want to demonstrate that there's just not a ton of real high-end talent. Logan O'Hoppe, a guy that we spent the better part of this playthrough trying to trade away and get rid of and get some value for, and actually never really achieved that, quite honestly, because we probably waited a little too long to trade him, is one of 4 position players available who our scout thinks has 3-star or higher potential. So not a particularly impressive class of potential free agent position players, and obviously some of these guys could sign with their current teams and not even end up hitting free agency. Pitching, as is often the case, a fair amount of high-end closers available, but looking for pretty significant money. When we look at potential starting pitchers, though, outside of Spencer Strider, who we flirted with last offseason, and Logan Gilbert, who we had as a very effective rental this past year, and Tanner Houck, and then Zach Wheeler, who's dealing with shoulder inflammation and is going to be 40 early next year. not a ton of high-end pitchers who are starters available. We could always try to reunite with DeGrom in his 40s, but he's coming off of a torn labrum. Cole Reagans, looking for similar money to what we'd be paying for King. Would give us another lefty in the pen, but he's also fragile physically, already also in his early 30s. So when I look at Michael King at $17 million next year and Kyle Tucker at $30 million, I don't know that I see anyone who, for that kind of money, I like better than the two guys that we have. Now, we've certainly seen over the past several off seasons some incredible international free agents hit the market, one of whom, or actually two of whom, we finally signed this past off season and had prominent roles on our title team. But I don't know if getting rid of King and or Tucker and just hoping that we get lucky that there is a transformative international free agent at one of their positions who happen to hit the market this upcoming offseason is really a strategy or just hope. So obviously haven't had to make any decisions yet since the offseason is only starting today, and we will now start with what I talked about a while ago and actually go through our roster and take a look at everyone on the team and start planning. But once again, long story short, and I really shouldn't probably ramble on so much and should just say this stuff much more concisely than I do, but it's conceivable to me right now as we're beginning this review with what our team looks like and what the potential free agent market looks like, that both Michael King and Mr. Tucker could end up back with us next year if we decide to exercise those team options. But I've lied to you again, and before we get into the pitching, just want to quickly review the team statistics one final time. 107-55 record, which was actually 4 worse than Pythagorean expectations, but still had the best record in baseball and ended up winning the World Series, so all worked out on that end. The offense, incredible, first in the American League in runs scored, and you can see we were first, second, or third in all of the primary offensive categories. First in base running, middle of the pack in steals. Very good defensive team, finally. We've been working on that for years with this franchise. Second in defensive efficiency and second in zone rating. And we ended up second in the American League in runs allowed, and we were the top 2 in every primary pitching category except for home runs allowed, where we were tied for 5th. So these everyday players and these pitchers and these fielders that we're going to be talking about, if we just try to keep this team together, we're certainly likely to be favorites on paper or on the computer screen for a title again next year, which does make me again lean towards potentially keeping Michael King and Kyle Tucker. One last thing to note, I did talk and have had a good back and forth with several of you in the comments over the past few days about the huge increase in fan interest and the 2-notch boost in fan loyalty that happened over the second half of the season for us, which was just a more dramatic move than I've ever experienced in OOTP. They have made changes to the way that works, so I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it's definitely a different thing. One thing that I did note when I went through the statistics and thought about the season a little more in depth, is when you look at our team schedule, we won our final 7 games of the month of June. And then when we take a look at our team statistics, you can see that we were 17-8 in July and then 21-6 in both August and September. So with that 7-0 record to end the month of June, what that means is we were a ridiculous 66-20 over our past 86 games, over the final 86 games of the regular season. I don't know that I've ever had a team that's gone 66-20 over the final 86 games. So there is some thought to me that maybe because this team was just so incredible over the second half of the year, that's what led to those big increases in fan loyalty and fan interest. Still doesn't make a ton of sense to me when all is said and done, because if we do go back into the team history for these Angels, we led the American League and led all of baseball with 104 wins last season, and our fan interest actually regressed over the course of the year. So still not totally confident how, sorry, it was actually 102 wins a year ago. I'm looking at the Pythagorean numbers here, but it was still the best record in baseball a season ago, only 5 wins less than we had this year. And as I noted, the fan interest actually regressed last year pretty significantly over the second half of the year. So can't say that I fully understand how that fan interest dynamic is working in the new game. Definitely more volatile than it's been in the past. But as we're sitting here beginning the off season, we've got it up to 98 now, so we're in a pretty good position to hopefully be able to make more money next year and hopefully have a better financial result for Mr. Moreno, in addition to maintaining a hopefully very high level product on the field. And with that, I will finally start doing the end of season review. The pitching staff, as we talked about, excellent. Spencer Schwellenbach, our ace, 11-6. The ERA creeped up to close to 4 this year, but he still led the league in walks per 9 and strikeout to walk ratio. Put up a 3.3 WAR. He is headed into his final arbitration eligible year, going to be making around $13.5 million. We will likely have him back as our number 1 starter. Taj Bradley, who we picked up in a trade with Tampa a couple of years ago, will be back as well. 15-4 with a 3.95 ERA for us, a 2.9 WAR. He is a good, solid number 2 starter for us, a role he'll likely fill again next year. We've already talked about Michael King a lot. We've got a big decision to make on him. Christian Scott, a bit of a down year for him. Another guy who's arbitration eligible again, going to be making about $10 million next year. We'll likely bring him back. 12-8, the ERA ballooned to 4.37, but the WAR of 2.8 wasn't materially different than what he's done the last few years. The 30-year-old's stuff never really developed to be all that special. Definitely envision him as a number 5 starter type for us next year, but given that we do have a pretty big payroll and the higher end starters who are available on the free agent market aren't all that much better than Scott generally and will definitely cost more, probably going to look to bring him back. Logan Gilbert, as we talked about, was a rental for us, 6-1 with a 3.50 ERA. For us, did a really nice job stabilizing the back of the rotation after King and Mr. Riley both had season-ending injuries, and ultimately was our number 4 starter in the playoffs. Take a look at what he did for us in the postseason this year, and 2-0 in his 2 starts with a 1.93 ERA, so he came up really big for us in the postseason. So definitely glad that we made that addition. If you can do some simple math, you see that if we let Gilbert go, we only have 4 starters. That's because we are anticipating the return of Mr. Riley, who we mentioned. Jake Riley, his season ended on July 28th with a torn meniscus in his knee. Unfortunate for the 24-year-old that we picked 14th overall out of Stanford a couple of years ago, because with an 8-2 record and a 2.65 ERA with more than 2 months to go in a season, he was going to be making a strong case to be Rookie of the Year. Put up a 3.6 WAR for us, one of the best numbers, not just among our pitchers, but among the entire team. The hope is he will be healthy and well for us for next season. And rotation of Schwellenbach, Bradley, King, Riley, and Scott is, in my mind, pretty solid, although we probably will need to figure out somebody who can be a swing starter for us and an injury fill-in if we do move on from Mr. Gilbert. Our bullpen was also very good. Jhoan Duran, who we signed, picked up in a trade a couple of years ago. And then we did let him hit free agency after we rented him for half a season and ended up signing him to a 2-year, $20 million contract. Wasn't that great for us a year ago, but was better this year. 2.52 ERA with 39 saves, 22 shutdowns to 7 meltdowns. Put up a 1.3 WAR for us. Was a good, solid closer for us, but he is a guy who is going to be looking for pretty big money again, looking for $20 million a year still, and right now he wants 3-year deals, so we'll likely be moving on from him. Lefty Garrett McDaniels is a arbitration eligible player, the contract getting up there, but particularly if we move on from Spire. McDaniels is younger than Spire, and in my mind, better than Spire, had a 3.42 ERA this year, close to a win above replacement level. Similar to Spire, he's definitely more effective against left-handed batters than he is against right-handed batters. Cade Smith started the year in a stopper role for us, and eventually we just moved him to a setup role when he was pretty unproductive, given how effective he was for us a year ago. The ERA ballooned to 5.14 over the 68 and a third innings that he pitched. He gave up a sickly 14 home runs. That was the big driver of his year being so much worse than a year before. He was almost 3 wins below replacement this year, worse than he was a year ago. That said, still put up a 3.13 Sierra, and when we look at his profile, I think he can still be a useful player. The issue is that he is headed to free agency. Fortunately, though, we've already made him an offer. Can't remember exactly what it was because it was a couple days ago in real time at this point, but I think it was in the neighborhood of what he's making now. I think it was like $4 to $5 million a year that he was looking for, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it more, I think he may have required us to promise him the closer role to be able to sign for that amount. In fact, I'm confident that's what it was. Actually, I could go and I could show you this if I would just click to the right places. And we've made offers, as you can see, to several of the arbitration eligible players. Haven't even talked about all of these guys yet. The money for Cade Smith was a little more than I had remembered, $5.25 million a year over 3 years. And as I said, he did require us to promise him that closer role to make things happen, but felt like it made sense to get an offer out to him. And we also got a 3-year offer out to Colin Snyder. These other 4 guys that we've already made offers to are arbitration eligible pitchers. There's certainly some other players that we need to make some decisions on, and we've also offered minor league contracts to many players, as you can see here. So Cade Smith hopefully will be back with us next year, and given that we had to promise him the closer role to get him to consider that contract for what we thought was reasonable money, given his skill set, he'll likely get the first opportunity to be our closer next year with the likely departure of Duran. Carlos Espinoza, arbitration eligible for the first time, had a solid year for us, 3.72 ERA over 65 and a third innings pitched, led the American League with 29 holds for us. Tyler Koopman is a part of the reason why we might end up moving on from Gabe Spire, the lefty, former 5th-round pick. Spent most of the year in AAA where he was effective, and he was effective when we brought him up to the majors, ridiculously effective in some ways with a 28-1 strikeout to walk ratio and over 15 strikeouts per 9 innings. I think that the number 34 prospect in baseball, the old Fox, is going to have a very prominent role in our bullpen next year. Ultimately could be a closer for us in the not too distant future if Cade Smith fails in that role. Saw that we made an extension offer to Colin Snyder, not for big money, 3.67 ERA over 56 and a third innings. He's been a competent reliever for us over the last few years since we picked him up on waivers. Happy to have him back as just a generic arm in the bullpen. Ryan Walker, set to hit free agency. He's more of a difficult decision for me. He's been really good for us these last couple years. 2.55 ERA this season, 2.41 ERA a year ago. Looking for $6.5 million a year over 3 years. It's not a crazy number, but with Snyder and Espinoza and Smith as righties in the bullpen, all making less than that. Don't know if we really need to bring Walker back at that kind of number. Brock Selvage, lefty who was a starter in AAA and an occasional starter for us in the majors this year. We had a 2.41 ERA. He's still making the major league minimum, but he's out of options. Likely will be in the mix to be a lefty long reliever for us and possibly someone who could help us down the line in the event of an injury to the rotation. Klassen, kind of a similar situation, but the right-handed version, started 14 games for us this year, 10-6 with a 3.27 ERA. Put up almost a win above replacement. Another guy who is not yet arbitration eligible, but also out of option years. Could end up being a long reliever, spot starter for us. And then we've already talked about Gabe Spire, the lefty. So don't think it's inconceivable that we used McDaniels and Koopman as our primary lefties out of the bullpen next year. Move on from Spire at $3.5 million, or perhaps try to trade him away if there's any trade value there, and then have Selvage potentially in the mix as a third left-hander out of the pen for us. And one other guy on the injured list that we didn't mention was Ben Joyce, torn elbow ligament in spring training, and then he had a setback a few weeks ago. He's basically going to miss all of next year now. He's a guy who is still signed for another couple years. We signed him 6 years, $13.5 million. Thought that was going to be a really good arm for us out of the bullpen. And given that he's unlikely to pitch again until 2031, when all is said and done, he'll have pitched 14 games for us over the last 4 years of this contract. That being said, I'd love to trade him away. I don't know exactly what we're possibly going to get for him. I guess I can look at it right now. I would have to think that there's going to be basically just some of the worst contracts in baseball that we could get in return for him. Not that he's not a bad player, but he's I was completely wrong. We can't actually get rid of the contract if we just want to bail on him for a guy making a minimum or a guy on a minor league contract. I don't know that there's going to be anything all that valuable here for us, but it is honestly a broader pool of guys than I anticipated. Yonel Carrette, starting pitcher from the Twins. Oof. He's young, he's cheap, but that lack of control is why I made that sound when I looked at him. Just not really the type of guy that I'd want on my team. And as a guy who's almost 27 years old, don't think that control is going to just magically get better. But we ultimately can pretty easily get out of this contract if we want to, and we don't have to take on a crazy contract in return, although we certainly have the option to take on some bad contracts if we'd like to. You know, if we want to be paying Ronaldo Lopez $21.2 million a year through his mid to late 30s, we can do that. Certainly a respectable major league pitcher. But I think, I'd prefer to have King, who's, younger and I think arguably a little better. Also, kind of weird that we only have. Actually, it's not weird that we only have low scouting accuracy on him because he missed all of this past year with an injury. So, another reason to maybe be cautious about bringing him on board. Torn flexor tendon in his elbow over a year ago, and he missed all of the past season. So, that explains why we really don't know exactly what he looks like. But to my original point, we can probably get Ben Joyce off of the books relatively easily, which will save us $3 million next year. Not going to make a huge difference, but had real high expectations for him. Loved that he threw over 100 miles an hour, extreme ground ball tendencies, and at times he's been a good pitcher for us with a 90 FIP minus over the course of his career. He just hasn't pitched enough for us, particularly in these recent years. And before we finish up the episode, we'll turn our attention to the other half of our team, our everyday players, and do our review of them. Drake Baldwin, we had spend most of the year in AAA because it was his last option eligible year. 268, 23 homers, 75 ribbies down there. He was also productive in a very small sample size of 5 at-bats when he went 2 for 5 with a ribby for us at the major league level. Pretty average-ish offensive player at this point, but a left-handed hitting catcher who's a bit above average defensively, still has some value. Question is whether it's going to be value for us as a player on our major league team next year, or is he someone who we can extract a little value from in the trade market? Juan Flores, the right-handed hitting catcher, started for us against left-handed pitching this past year and hit .312 in 186 at-bats. What a difference a year makes. A year ago in that exact same role, starting for us against left-handed pitching, started 54 games and hit .222 with a 69 WRC plus and a 0.6 WAR. This season, he puts up a ridiculous WAR of over 3 in just 54 starts, 9 homers, 35 ribbies. The truth is likely somewhere in between these two seasons. I don't think that's a bold statement to make, but a good, solid defensive catcher, still making the major league minimum, and probably works well in a platoon next year with Min Jae Kim, one of the international free agents that we signed this past off season. The veteran came over from South Korea at the age of 33. And all he did for us this year was hit .261, 22 homers, and 73 ribbies. Put up a 132 WRC plus and a 4.7 WAR. Is that really good offense with slightly above average defense worked out really well for us. So feel like with potentially Kim and Flores coming back, we should be in pretty good shape at catcher for next season. Baldwin, as I noted, also in the mix to make the team, particularly if we decided to try to move Kim into more of a DH role. He could also play left field for us, not the defense that I'd love to have out there for a team that, as we talked about, was very good defensively this past season. But we do have options where all three of these guys could be with us next year. The infield, feel like it's pretty stable as well. Vlad Guerrero Jr. had a down year for him. Had his really only big year with us a year ago. Still drove in over 100 runs this year, but the batting average dipped to .249, only 19 home runs, a 104 WRC plus, and a 1.3 WAR. Definitely not what we're expecting for $37 million a year. Take a look at the postseason, and he was not effective there either. Did have 2 homers and 12 ribbies, so when he actually made contact, he was productive, but he struck out 14 times, batted just a .173, and despite the 12 ribbies in 14 games, put up just a 58 WRC plus, and was basically a replacement level player for us in the postseason. That said, likely will be back as our first baseman next year. I can't imagine the trade market for him is going to be very robust with the money he's making, particularly now that he's on the wrong side of 30. Sean Gamble, similar to Jake Riley, was a guy that we thought could be in the mix for some Rookie of the Year votes. Unfortunately, similar to Riley, he also missed some time with injury, but still had a really nice rookie season. Hit 295 and 420 at-bats, put up a 126 WRC plus and a 3.7 WAR. A good defensive player who's very versatile. The one criticism I'd have for him right now is that he was not that impressive on the base paths. 9 steals in 17 attempts. Given his ratings and given the strategy tendencies we had for him this year, would have expected him to try to steal more than 17 bases and to have been more effective than that. But as we talked about in previous episodes, we're having a bit of trouble getting some of these guys to run as much as we'd like, which is a little odd. Zach Neto, who became a utility guy for us this year and is set to make $15 million next year, he could be a player that if there's any trade value we look to move on from. Still had 356 at-bats for us because we did have some injuries, as we talked about, to Gamble in the infield, but not the greatest offensive season. A 97 WRC plus. He was a win and a half above replacement. Could be in the mix to be a starter for some team next year, but with us having Guerrero at first, Gamble at second, and Wakabayashi at short, we've got a number of guys, including Neto, who could be competing to be a starter for us at third base next year, or perhaps be a utility infielder, or perhaps be someone we move on from. And Addison Barger is unfortunately in that mix also at this point. He's set to make $9.5–10 million next year. We've talked about him a lot over the years. We picked him up in a trade with Toronto that first off season. He's been freakishly productive for us over the years, given the relatively pedestrian hitting profile that he has. 109, 128, and 125 WRC pluses his first 3 years. This year kind of came down to earth, was basically a league average-ish offensive player, 237 average, 16 homers, 71 ribbies, 2.5 WAR, so he's still a good, solid major leaguer. The question is, do we want to spend $10 million on him next year or not? Part of the reason we could move on from him and possibly move on from Neto is that we do have Josua Lugo in the mix. The young third baseman hit 333 in 84 major league at-bats after hitting 336 in AAA Salt Lake for us. Not as high-end defensively as some of these other guys that we've talked about in terms of their ratings, but still Lugo is a very versatile defensive player who looks like a solid contact hitter, making the major league minimum. And the last of the guys who could be fighting for that third base spot and or a utility infield spot for us next year is Anthony Volpe, set to make $8 million next year. He was in a utility role this year, hit 241 in 282 at-bats, but did have 13 homers and 35 ribbies, 96 WRC plus 1.2 WAR. Like the captain personality, like the defensive versatility, like the speed, although he stole only 9 bases this year and still has a respectable major league bat. I tend to think Volpe will be back with us in some role. Tend to think Lugo will be back with us in some role. As we talked about, Guerrero likely starting at first, Gamble likely starting at second, and Wakabayashi, who we haven't talked about yet, will be certainly starting for us at short. So the question is, do we bring Neto or Barger back as a third baseman, or maybe try to let Lugo or Volpe be our third baseman next year and have the other one of them be a utility infielder? And last but certainly not least is your prospective American League Rookie of the Year, Yoshihiko Wakabayashi Swaney, who we signed to that massive contract, 10 years, $410 million as a international free agent last offseason. And he lived up to expectations, put up a 6.6 WAR for us. Defensively was an above average shortstop as far as his zone rating and defensive efficiency. Led the American League with 101 walks and a 420 on base percentage while hitting 319 for us. 6.6 WAR was second best on our team, but excellent season for Swaney Wakabayashi, and he will be back as our shortstop in 2030. So we're potentially pretty loaded in the infield, potentially pretty loaded at catcher. The positions group where we aren't so loaded is the outfield, particularly if we were to move on from Mr. Tucker. Left field has been a perplexing position for us over the course of this playthrough. We've had defensive struggles. We've consistently had offensive struggles. We've given the position to guys as full-time players. We've had a lot of different players come through in platoons. And no matter what we do, we just can't get consistent production out of that left field position. And ultimately, it was no different this year, even after we made some significant trades and turned the position over entirely last off season, and then turned it over entirely again before the trade deadline this year. But nothing really worked, and it's kind of crazy because if you were to think on a baseball field of what's probably the easiest position to find somebody to play, I think left field probably would be high on the list of positions where it's easy to find someone who's competent. Unfortunately, we just haven't really done that. Brought on Daz Cameron to be the right-handed hitting portion of our platoon, and he put up a 78 WRC plus in 70 at-bats after we picked him up in a trade with Atlanta in mid-July. Set to make $3.6 million next year. I don't think we bring him back at that kind of number. Carlos Jorge, talent-wise, could be in the mix. The left-handed hitting left fielder, though, was brutal for us, hitting just a $196 in 92 at-bats after he was having a monster season for the White Sox. He didn't even end up making our playoff roster. But this is a guy who is a two-time Gold Glove winner and was actually an all-star this year when we traded for him from the White Sox. Like his defense as a left fielder, he's got some speed, and the bat looks respectable. As a platoon guy playing only against right-handed pitching, I think there's potentially some value there. The issue is he's going to be making about $7.5 million next season through arbitration. And he was, as we talked about, a complete disaster for us while we had him. One bright spot on the team for us this year, and the guy who ended up being our starting left fielder in the playoffs against right-handed pitching, was Anthony Scull. He was our everyday DH for most of the regular season, played only 8 games in left field, and he started 15 in center field over the course of the year. But the rookie hit .293 with 16 homers, 76 ribbies, stole 11 bases, put up a 138 WRC plus and a 2.8 WAR. This is a guy who was part of this Angels organization when we took it over, and ended up turning into a pretty solid player for us thus far. He made an all-star game this year as a rookie. Likely will get some Rookie of the Year votes, although as we talked about, Wakabayashi was going to be very tough for Scull, Riley, or Gamble to ultimately beat in that voting. Scull certainly could be in the mix to be our left fielder next year, which would probably solve that problem against right-handed pitching. The issue is then we open up a hole for designated hitter, which admittedly might be some options to fill. One that won't be is Austin Wells. We picked him up as a rental from the Yankees, but he is looking for big bucks, almost $22 million a year for an extension. He was very effective for us as a rental, hit .275 with 5 homers, 17 ribbies, and 131 at-bats. Put up a 129 WRC plus for us and a WAR of close to 1. We tried teaching him how to play left field at the major league level. during the regular season. But as we noted, when we got to the playoffs, we put Skull, who's more accomplished defensively, into that role and put Wells as our DH for the playoffs. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, he was kind of a disaster, just 5 for 33. Similar to Guerrero, did drive in a lot of runs when he did get hits, but overall hit just a $152 with a sickly 9 WRC plus for us. So as good and helpful as he was in the regular season, and as much as I enjoyed having another Yankee on the squad, can't see us paying $22 million for Wells next year. Kyle Tucker, we've already talked about. We've got an option for him next year for $30 million. Given that we only have 2 guys that we're confident are going to be back in the mix for outfield and DH next year, that would be Skull and Put Rodriguez, who we haven't talked about yet. Feel that it's likely Tucker will be back with us. Wells at that kind of money, there's just no way. Cameron and Jorge, to me, are more a coin flip. I kind of think Jorge is a better player, and he's certainly younger. But you look, and we've got a ton of left-handed hitting bats already in the outfield. Wouldn't mind a right-handed hitting outfielder, and Cameron's the only option there. So definitely a lot to think about. The one thing we don't have to think about for next year as far as the outfield is who our center fielder is going to be. Former 6th overall pick Andres Rodriguez a year ago was the Rookie of the Year, Silver Slugger Award winner. This year he made his first All-Star team and, of course, won the World Championship with us, was also the ALCS MVP. Followed up his Rookie of the Year season with a monster year, 8.3 WAR, easily the best on the team. Hit .291, 36 doubles, 43 homers, a league best 125 ribbies, also scored 114 runs, stole 10 bases. Again, 10 bases in 16 attempts, though, for a player with excellent speed and well above average aggressiveness and stealing ability, as well as strategy settings that were ultimately set pretty aggressively. Would have expected him to be a little more active on the base paths, but we're not complaining. He still put up a 158 WRC plus for us and was also well above average in terms of his zone rating, slightly above average for a center fielder in terms of his defensive efficiency. Don't think he's going to win the MVP award this year because there was a monster season for the Texas Rangers from Sebastian Walcott, who put up a 10.2 WAR, led the league in runs, hits, doubles, homers, batting average, slugging, OPS, WRC plus, and WAR. But Andres Rodriguez and Yoshihiko Wakabayashi certainly won't shock me if they finish 2nd and 3rd in the MVP voting. And as we talked about, I would expect that Wakabayashi will be a runaway Rookie of the Year award winner. So a few more decisions to make in the left field or in the outfield overall. Rodriguez and Skull are the only 2 that are definitely back. I think I'm leaning towards bringing back Tucker just because I don't know that there's better options out there. Wells definitely not back, and then Cameron and Jorge, similar to Tucker, decisions we have to make. So if you have any thoughts and recommendations on what you might do as far as some of these team options we have and players that we should pursue in free agency, players that maybe we shouldn't pursue in free agency, guys that we should try to bring back, guys that we should let go, always helpful to hear from the Worldwide Scouting Department in the comment section to the episode. Salary arbitration-wise, we mentioned that we made offers to the 4 pitchers, Schwellenbach, Scott, Espinoza, and McDaniels. As we've talked about, the 3 position players, Barger, Cameron, and Jorge, are all guys that I'm still thinking about. Free agent-wise, made offers to Smith and Snyder. Duran, the money's too high. Ryan Walker is kind of more of a toss-up to me. And then the free agents without compensation with the money that Wills and Gelbert are both looking for. Think we're almost certainly going to be moving on from those 2. Don't really want to make a qualifying offer to Duran because I don't know that I want him back next year at $20 million again. And I think he'd probably certainly accept that offer if we made it to him. But if you've got any thoughts on these topics or anything else, would love to hear them. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.